Designed by the legendary Yoshizaki Mine of Kimono Friends, it is the solar twin in a pair of twin maids. This is MID04 Solanshira, with a mostly new kit of Plant Seeve, HE Clear, Range Claw, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Breakneck, which buffs mobility and evade while in heating phase. Now, a pair of twin maids is most certainly something that we're no stranger to in Meta, or even just twins, or even sets of 3 at all. But a set of 2 based on the Sun and Moon is most certainly a very unique pairing. And of the two, Solanshira seems to make herself apparent as the more aggressive of the 2 twins, with a couple very powerful skills and a unique healing skill being introduced into the game that will really throw a wrench in a lot of people that try to make use of passive support through plants while on the field. Plant Seeve on the head part is a brand new skill being introduced into the game, which will steal the amount of enemy plants as long as they are above 1 and move them to the allied side of the field. So this means if the enemy is trying to use anything such as, say, First Aid, Heater Plant, Heal Plant, or anything else of the like that tries to offer some kind of passive support through setup skills, well, guess what? Solanshira says, yes, that's for me, thank you, and moves it to her side of the field. The only time this fails, however, is if there is no plant on the enemy side to make use of, or if the number of plants uses is at 1 and is about to expire. So a little bit of caution and timing will be advised if you are planning to use this, but it looks like it'll be a perfect counter skill for anyone that tries to make use of that passive support, like I said, to really make sure that if they're going to try to use it, you're going to benefit from it instead. HE Clear or Hyper Effect Clear is another new skill being introduced into the game, which kind of follows the same track of a lot of other skills we've been seeing get boosted damage or boosted damage versions of them in recent developments. Hyper Effect Clear basically is about, as the name describes, it is basically just regular Effect Clear, but with an extra added damage, base damage, and with piercing on top of that. However, Effect Clear has a very unique condition that, when used correctly, can actually make it extremely dangerous. This is essentially very good for enemies that try to make use of a lot of buffs. So, say, anything with Precognition or Hypercrept, Shoot Boost, Fight Boost, Cybercore, anything that provides a positive buff to the team, this is going to be a very good counter. Because what it does when attacking the enemy is checking the target for the number of positive buffs that they have if applicable. Then, for every buff it finds, deals additional punish damage. And then at the end of the turn, will remove all the buffs from the target. Now, originally, I would try to grade something with Effect Clear pretty highly on this grounds because it serves as a very good counter. But since the original Effect Clear does not have piercing, it made its overall utility very, very difficult to track and even more tricky to actually use effectively because you weren't able to carry over anything no matter how much punish damage you dealt. The Hyper version of this, Hyper Effect Clear, basically takes that issue and throws it out the window. Range Claw, and the only skill that Solanshira is not introducing as a new skill, is another unique melee skill that has a rather interesting caveat to it that changes its behaviors relative to if the enemy is close to Solanshira or far away from her. The closer the target, Range Claw will deal more damage to them and get a damage plus. But the farther away the target is from her, it instead will get a success boost instead, and grant it more likely to land or even be more painful. However, Range Claw also has another caveat on top of that makes it extremely dangerous, and that's the fact that it is a guaranteed critical hit if you're able to attack an enemy in cooldown. So this is very similar to something such as, say, Sujigiri or even Sanction in some cases, where you deal bonus damage for stabbing an enemy in the back. That's what this is for, and with a very powerful kitty claw like what she's packing, she's going to make sure it is extremely painful for anyone that dares try to show her their backside. Biped legs means that Solanshira will have fairly solid coverage across most terrains and is the most user-friendly when it comes to terrain matching and compatibility, and her leg stats actually aren't too shabby either for what she brings to the table. A base mobility of 872 is really nice, as she already has a fairly solid start in the speed department. An evade of 1552 also is nice, as this means she can dodge or graze fairly easily if she's not in a no dodge or no defense state, or no dodge state while in cooldown, or through some kind of penalty. A melee resist of 1388 is good, as this means she can hold her own up close and personal fairly solidly, but a shoot resist of 822 is going to be a pretty notable weakness to her, as this means that anything that tries to keep their distance and take her down from afar is definitely going to be dealing more damage than normal. However, in the armor department though, she is surprisingly bulky to make up for this, with a head armor of just shy of 3600, right arm at just shy of 3900, left arm at 3839, and legs at just over 4000 HP. She is fairly healthy in that department, so even if she does take a couple pot shots from enemy targets from afar, she is still able to kind of keep the damage fairly low or go without something breaking within 1 or 2 hits. Overall, though, she is fairly solid in the damage department as well, with hyper effect clear at that base 1366 and range claw at base 1529. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I do have to rate Solanshira kind of on the lower end of the middle of the road at a 5.5 out of 10. She can do what she is able to do fairly well, and if done correctly, she can be extremely dangerous. But the problem with Solanshira is the fact that she is very situational in almost every single part that she brings to the table except Range Claw, and even then has its own conditions you have to be careful with. Plant Seeve is unfortunately useless if the enemy isn't using a setup skill and specifically a plant of any kind, so that automatically knocks that off the table if they are not using it. And Hyper Effect Clear, even if it is just a little bit stronger than basic Effect Clear with Piercing, you're going to be relying on the enemy using a lot of support buffs, and if they don't have any or they aren't able to add any, that kind of makes it very difficult to use and make the most of, leaving only Range Claw as the only viable skill she has, being with the damage plus at close range or the success plus and critting at long range. Breakneck does kind of help her out a little bit though, as anytime that she is in heating and facing the command line, she does get a little bit of a mobility and evade boost, so it does allow her to outrun things just a little bit easier than others, or even follow up a little easier if she catches them on the cooldown with Range Claw. As mixed parts though, I do have to rate her just a little bit higher at a 6 out of 10 though, because even though she is extremely situational as a pure set and kind of really weird to use, you could possibly mix the parts up on different builds based on how you need to use her. Plant Seeve for any time that you check the enemy and they have some kind of plant-based setup skills they're using. Hyper Effect Clear for any enemy's buffers and supporters. Range Claw and Breakneck you can use just about anywhere though, so you really shouldn't have too much problem using either of those in any build you put them in.